Chapter 4. David Kimche. David Kimche was born in London, England in 1928 and died on March 8, 2010 at the age of 82 in Israel from brain cancer. David Kimche was an Israeli diplomat, a former deputy director of the Mossad, a spy master and journalist. He was the main contact between the United States and Iran during the Iran-Contra affair. Kimche was also president of the Israel Council on Foreign Relations and a member of the steering committee of the International Alliance for Arab-Israel Peace. Kimche joined Mossad, Israel's foreign intelligence service, in 1953. While in the Foreign Intelligence Service, he served in a number of postings in Africa, Asia, and Europe. Among many others, he recruited Olivia Frank, who infiltrated the Abu Nidal organization and was part of a team which stopped a right-wing group from bombing the homes of Jewish families in Munich. Kimche moved up the ranks to eventually become Mossad's deputy director and then became the Director General of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, holding that post from 1980 until 1987. In 1987, after leaving the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Kimche was appointed Ambassador at Large of the State of Israel and served a number of missions, especially in Arab countries. During his tenure, Kimche would often engage in back-channel diplomacy when the political context required subtlety. In an article written in the Israel Journal of Foreign Affairs, Ner Levitan wrote the following about his career. Quote, Kimche strongly believed that what seemed impossible could be made possible, and he accomplished just that in his long and distinguished career. Kimche was one of the foremost secret emissaries in service of the State of Israel at a time when back-channel diplomacy was the only way forward to a more peaceful future. End quote. On January 17, 1986, then National Security Advisor John Poindexter sent the following memorandum to President Ronald Reagan. The subject matter, Covert Action Finding Regarding Iran. Prime Minister Perez of Israel secretly dispatched his secret advisor on terrorism with instructions to propose a plan by which Israel, with limited assistance from the U.S., can create conditions to help bring about a more moderate government in Iran. The Israelis are very concerned that Iran's deteriorating position in the war with Iraq, the potential for further radicalization in Iran, and the possibility of enhanced Soviet influence in the Gulf all pose significant threats to the security of Israel. They believe it is essential that they act to at least preserve a balance of power in the region. The Israeli plan is premised on the assumption that moderate elements in Iran can come to power if these factions demonstrate their credibility in defending Iran against Iraq and in deterring Soviet intervention. To achieve the strategic goal of a more moderate Iranian government, the Israelis are prepared to unilaterally commence selling military material to Western-oriented Iranian factions. It is their belief that by so doing, they can achieve a heretofore unobtainable penetration of the Iranian governing hierarchy. The Israelis are convinced that the Iranians are so desperate for military material, expertise, and intelligence that the provision of these resources will result in favorable long-term changes in both personal and attitudes within the Iranian government. Further, once the exchange relationship has commenced, a dependency would be established on those who are providing the requisite resources. Such an outcome is consistent with our policy objectives and would present significant advantages for U.S. national interests. As described by the Prime Minister's emissary, the only requirement the Israelis have is an assurance that they will be allowed to purchase U.S. replacements for the stocks that they sell to Iran. We have researched the legal problems of Israel selling U.S. manufactured arms to Iran. Because of the requirement of U.S. law for recipients of U.S. arms to notify the U.S. government of transfers to third countries, I do not recommend that you agree with this specific details of the Israeli plan. However, there is another possibility. Some time ago, Attorney General William French Smith determined that under an appropriate finding, you could authorize the CIA to sell arms to countries outside of the provisions of the laws and reporting requirements for foreign military sales. The objectives of the Israeli plan could be met if the CIA, using an authorized agent as necessary, purchased arms from the Department of Defense under the Economy Act, and then transferred them to Iran directly after receiving appropriate payment from Iran. The covert action funding attached provides the latitude for the transactions indicated above to proceed. The Iranians have indicated an immediate requirement for 4,000 basic TOW weapons for use in the launchers they already hold. The Israelis are also sensitive to a strong U.S. desire to free our Beirut hostages and have insisted that the Iranians demonstrate both influence and good intent by an early release of the 5 Americans. Both sides have agreed that the hostages will be immediately released upon commencement of this action. Prime Minister Perez had his emissary pointedly note that they will understand our position on not making concessions to terrorists. They also point out, however, that terrorist groups, movements, and organizations are significantly easier to influence through governments than they are by direct approach. In that, we have been unable to exercise any persuasion over Hezbollah during the course of nearly 2 years of kidnapping. This approach through the government of Iran may well be our only way to achieve the release of the Americans held in Beirut. It must again be noted that since this dialogue with the Iranians began in September, Reverend Weir has been released and there have been no Shia terrorist attacks against Americans or Israeli persons, property, or interests. Therefore, it is proposed that Israel make the necessary arrangements for the sale of 4,000 TOW weapons to Iran. Sufficient funds to cover the sale would be transferred to an agent of the CIA. The CIA would then purchase the weapons from the Department of Defense and deliver the weapons to Iran through the agent. If all of the hostages are not released after the first shipment of 1,000 weapons, further transfers would cease. On the other hand, since hostage release is in some respects a byproduct of a larger effort to determine ties to potentially moderate forces in Iran, you may wish to redirect such transfers to other groups within the government at a later time. End memorandum. On May 23, 1987, the following article appeared in the New York Times related to David Kimche, entitled "An Israeli Tied to Contra Aid Can Go Home," by Philip Shenon. A former senior Israeli diplomat who negotiated the sale of American weapons to Iran is leaving the United States without testifying before a grand jury, but has agreed to return if ordered by a federal court, Israeli and American officials said today. After strenuous protests from the Israeli government, the former diplomat David Kimche, who served as Director General of the Israeli Foreign Ministry, was excused from appearing today before the grand jury in the Iran-Contra investigation. In a closed hearing in federal district court, Israeli officials argued that Mr. Kimche, a key figure in the Iran-Contra affair, was protected by diplomatic immunity and should not be forced to obey a grand jury subpoena issued this week in the special prosecutor of the Iran-Contra affair, Lawrence Walsh. Judge Aubrey E. Robinson, Jr. delayed a decision on the Israeli motion, but agreed to allow Mr. Kimche to leave for Israel. In return, officials said, the Israeli government and Mr. Kimche promised that he would return if courts upheld the subpoena. A diplomatic official said the Israeli government had warned prosecutors earlier this week that it would provide no further cooperation in the criminal investigation unless the subpoena was temporarily lifted. The Israeli government said it had ordered Mr. Kimche not to testify before the grand jury, fearing he might be forced to divulge information affecting Israel's national security. The Associated Press reported today from Israel that Prime Minister Yitzhak Shamir had described the subpoena as illegal and a clear violation of agreements between Israel and the United States. He declared that the former official would not be permitted to be interrogated by such a body. Mr. Walsh issued the subpoena this week for Mr. Kimche, who was on a private visit to New York, and ordered him to appear today in Washington. Mr. Kimche, who left the Israeli government last year, was instrumental in opening negotiations that led to the sale of American weapons in Iran. According to law enforcement officials, Mr. Kimche would be expected to face questions from the grand jury about the actions of Reagan administration officials and others involved in the Iran-Contra affair. It remained unclear, however, whether he could be forced to answer those questions. After a 90-minute court hearing today, Mr. Kimche, with Ambassador Meir Rosen at his side, said he would leave shortly for Israel. He told reporters, quote, "As you can see, I am leaving. I can leave the United States when I wish to and come back when I wish. And as far as I am concerned, that is very satisfactory." Israeli officials said that the subpoena had surprised Mr. Kimche and that he would not have come to the United States if he had thought he would be ordered to testify before Mr. Walsh. The subpoena, one official said, was served on Mr. Kimche on Wednesday morning during a business visit in New York. Legal scholars said they doubted that Mr. Kimche could invoke diplomatic immunity and refused to appear before the grand jury if he remained in the United States. But they said Mr. Kimche could probably not be compelled to discuss sensitive matters he oversaw while serving as a senior Israeli diplomat. That seemed to be the position taken today by the State Department. Quote, "Mr. Kimche is not a diplomat accredited in the United States, and under the circumstances we have refused to accord him diplomatic status," said Charles E. Redmond, the department spokesman. He continued, "He may, however, be immune from providing testimony with respect to certain subjects or information. He may be immune from providing testimony concerning special missions to the United States while he was Director General of the Israeli Foreign Ministry. Mr. Walsh acts independently of the Reagan administration. If he shares the State Department views, however, the questioning of Mr. Kimche before the grand jury might be very limited." According to American investigators, Mr. Kimche, while in the government post, suggested the sale of arms to Iran in 1985 and helped American officials make contact with Iranian middlemen. The investigators said Mr. Kimche urged President Reagan to approve plans for Israel to provide TOW anti-tank missiles for Iran in exchange for the release of American hostages in Lebanon. In December 1985, the investigators said, Mr. Kimche participated in a meeting in London with American officials and Manucher Ghorbanifar, an Iran arms dealer, to discuss the sale of weapons to Iran. Mr. Kimche is thought to have extensive information about the actions of several key Reagan administration officials in the case, including Oliver L. North, the former White House aide, and Robert C. McFarlane, the former National Security Advisor. Israel has protested the subpoena this week as a violation of an agreement between the Israeli government and congressional committees investigating the Iran-Contra affair. In exchange for an agreement by the committee not to seek testimony from Israeli officials, Israel agreed to provide extensive written answers to questions posed by American law enforcement officials.